Hey, everybody. Just going to wait a minute or two, let more people get logged in.
Right. Just mute us.
Okay. I'm recording, by the way. Alyssa asked me to do that so that we could put it up on YouTube so people that couldn't make it can watch it later. This is a little early for people like in the South Pacific, Australia, places like that. So we normally do them at 2 o'clock, um, that time zone, but we can't. We decided not to do that this time. So um, yeah. Anyway, so I'm recording. All right. So and keep your mics muted when you're not making a comment. It just makes it easier. There's no background noise, things like that. So I'm Geoff Perlman. I'm the founder and CEO of Xojo. I'm here to talk about 2025 R1. I can't believe it's 2025. That just seems like such a bizarre thing. I don't know about you guys, but I remember as a kid thinking about the year 2000 and that was so far away, and here we are in 2025. But anyway, so we're having this month's hangout. We're close enough to releasing 2025 R1. So I want to talk about that a little bit. And I've got a few engineers with me. Javier Menendez is here, and he works on a lot of things all over the place, iOS, the IDE, etc. And Ricardo Cruz is also here. He's working on the web framework, and we've talked about features that both of them worked on, and they're here in case I need an extra source of information. So anyway. So let's get started. And if you have questions, feel free to ask at any time. I'm figuring we'll go about an hour today. So in 2025 R1, we've fixed 170 bugs. That number may change a little bit. It may go up or down a little bit. That's not the final release notes, but that's pretty close to the number. And we've added 58 features. Obviously, features, some are very, very small, some are very, very big. But the sort of size of the effort of a feature I've found over the years is not necessarily linked to its value. Sometimes a feature that takes very little time for us to add has a lot of value, and other times a feature that takes a long time doesn't have as much value. It just depends. So I'm going to be talking about some of the big features that we planned for this release. But I can't cover 58 features, so you'll just have to go through the release notes for all that. All right. So one thing we did was we updated the toolbars on Windows and Linux. In fact, I'm going to share my screen, and I've got a, let's see, preview. There we go. So I made the screenshot so you can see this. So the toolbar above, that's what the toolbars look like on Windows and Linux. They have these large colored icons. And now we've made them more consistent across all platforms. So we're using smaller black and white icons. 1 second here. No, not that. There we go. Okay. And so you can see that they're very similar. The icons themselves on Windows and Linux might be slightly different from the Mac, and that's because on Mac we use SF symbols, which is provided by the operating system, whereas on Windows and Linux we use Bootstrap's icons for the toolbar. Anyway, they're slightly smaller, they're black and white, more consistent. And the other thing we've done with the toolbars, going over to the IDE, is you can now hide the captions. So if you go to view, there's hide toolbar captions. So if you want a little more room, you can do that. Um, and we have done something interesting in the documentation window with the toolbar. On the Mac, well, first of all, we've hidden the captions. On the Mac, the toolbar is part of the title bar because that's a feature you can do on the Mac. On Windows, we're now using the native, it's actually the native WinUI toolbar in the documentation window. That's not the case in the IDE, but it is in the documentation window, which is essentially sort of a test bed for using the native WinUI toolbar in the IDE for the future. So we're testing it out in the documentation window on Windows. And yeah, and I already mentioned the bootstrap icon. So those are the changes that have happened with toolbars, both in the IDE and in the documentation window itself. Of course, we also now have the IDE running on Linux ARM. So that means you can run on Raspberry Pi. It also means that if you use Parallels or VMware, say on the Mac, you can now run the IDE on Linux via a virtual machine, which we couldn't do in the past. So that's really handy. Another change we've made is that apps on Windows are considerably smaller. Hello World, for example, is quite a bit smaller now. In previous versions, Hello World was a little over 50 megs, and starting in R1, it's down to 15 megs, so less than a third of the previous size. That compares to on the Mac, where on the Mac, if you're just building for one processor, like let's say ARM, ARM 64, it's 12 and a half megs, so 15 megs for Windows, 12 and a half for Mac. You can see those are pretty close in size. And the reason for that change is that in previous versions of Xojo, we were including a library called ICU, which did things like date math and stuff like that and time zones and things. Well, that library is included in Windows 10 and above, and that's the minimum requirement for R1 for Windows. So that allows us to use the operating system version of that library instead of having to include it in every single app, which is really nice because it makes apps smaller. So that's good. All right. Next, let's see. Let's talk about the web list box. So I've got a couple of examples to show. First of all, column types. So we now have column types for the web list box, and I've got a simple example here to show that off. So you can now have checkboxes. You can have text fields are editable, so I can start editing right in the text field. And so this column is a text field type, and then this column is a text area type. So if you want to have, a lot of text in a column, that's where you use text area, pretty much just like on the desktop. Ricardo's been doing a great job as we have moved along with the web framework of bringing more and more features from the desktop version into the web version. So that's really great. So you now have column types for list boxes. Next, let's see. We've added reordering of rows, which is another desktop feature that's come to the web. So and you can control whether that's on or not. So I can drag and drop to put these rows in any order I want. So have that. It even scrolls as you drag, which is great. So that's just a terrific feature to have for the web list box. I can imagine what people have been doing in the past to get around this, where you probably had multiple list boxes or who knows what UI to let people reorder. So it's really great to just have it built in so you can just drag reorder. So that's another new thing for the web. And last but not least for the web, we now have just general drag and drop. So this is an example of a Kanban board that you use for project management. And Ricardo put this together just to demonstrate drag and drop. So I can drag and drop these things inside this list, over here. And I like how he's made it so that the cards move out of the way in this example. And if you have questions about how this example works, Ricardo would be the one to answer because I haven't delved into his code too much. But he's made it so you can drag in between them. You can add, I can add a new card. Yeah. So, but you can see that if you want to do drag and drop, you can absolutely now do it. Both in, I guess these are probably containers or a canvas control, and Actually, I think they must be containers, or maybe there's rectangles. But anyway, you can do drag and drop on the web in the list box. There's also another example where you can drag links and labels. So if you just need a link or a label that a user is going to drag from one place to another, you can do that too. So a lot of drag and drop features have been added to the web framework for R1, which is really, really great. Okay. Boy, we're zipping through this pretty quickly, so I hope you guys have some questions. Um, all right. Last but not least, as big features go, is we've added the ability for you to submit apps directly to the macOS App Store and the iOS App Store. And let me close up some windows here, and I'm going to open, let's see, I'm going to open, no, not that, um, this one, yeah. Okay. Okay. So, so publishing your apps to the Mac App Store and to the iOS App Store. We eventually want to do this for all the different app stores, but those are the most complicated ones, and so that's where we can add the most value. And essentially, the way this works is at a high level is that what you want to do is if you haven't done any of this before, you'll want to go to Apple's developer.apple.com website and create a developer account. That's the first thing you need to do. That's a one-time thing. Then once you got that set up, you'll need to go to appconnect.apple.com, and essentially you create a record in there under your account for each app that you're going to publish. And I would recommend that what you do is you just make a Hello World app in there. You don't submitting to that doesn't mean it's going to go out and into the Mac App Store. That's a separate step. So you can upload your apps into your account and then decide which ones you're going to actually submit to Apple for review and eventually, be published publicly. But the point being is just to get you used to the whole process of setting up a developer account, then setting up app records, and then making the necessary changes you need to make to your project. It would be good to just try that out well in advance of publishing your app so that you understand how the whole process works before you're in a situation where you're desperate to get your app published. That's not the time to find out that there's some step that you didn't know was involved. Anyway, so yeah, so you're going to need a developer account. You need to, create a record for your app at appconnect.apple.com. And all of this is documented in the R1 documentation, by the way, so you don't have to remember all this. We have pages about it that'll walk you through step by step at the Apple website and what you need to do in the IDE. But basically, you get that set up, you download some certificates from Xcode onto your computer. And then there's just a couple of things you need to do in a project that you want to publish to the Mac or iOS app stores. In fact, the Mac App Store is a little more work than the iOS App Store. It's even easier. One thing you need to do is you need to make sure that, let me go to App and go to Icon. You got to have icons for all these slots. You'll get an error back when you go to publish if you haven't. So make sure you're supplying icons for all the different sizes. This publish button, which is new, is what will ultimately publish it. But yeah, you need to have your icons. Next, you need to, let's go to shared. You need to have your version information filled in, major, minor, bug version. I don't know about bug version, but at least major, minor. And this version number here needs to be filled in. Does the copyright, Javier, does that need to be filled in? I don't remember about copyright.
Yeah, you need to fill in too, because
Okay.
it goes to the info sent to App Store Connect,
Okay.
so it can be uploaded.
Okay. So yeah, version information, the short version number, and the copyright need to be filled in. And then one of the things that you will get, well, one of the things you'll set up for your app is the bundle identifier. You'll set that up on App Connect .apple.com, and this needs to match that. So you need to make sure that the one you set up for the app record on appconnect.apple.com, the bundle you create is the one you put in here. You'll also need under App Store Connect to pick the category as well. And is this yeah, and you need to set up the one-time password, but that again is one time. So once you've got it set up, you're done. And all these settings pretty much are things that you do once and then you save them in your project and you don't have to worry about it. Then going to the build steps, you're going to need to get this provisioning profile, which you'll download from Xcode. Is that right, Javier? That one come from Xcode, or does that come from App Connect?
It's preferable when you create the provisioning profile to download it from developer.apple.com to your computer, rename it, and just drop it under copy file step.
Yeah. So
So
this is
not Xcode involved, but manually download it from the Apple
okay.
website.
Yeah. This is the distribution profile, right? Is that correct for test flight?
Yeah,
Yeah.
distribution profile.
Okay, so basically, you're going to download this distribution certificate. You're going to rename it to embedded.provision profile. Again, this is all in our documentation, so don't worry about it. You make a copy file step, drag it in here, set applies to release, set destination to contents folder, and the purpose of this is to allow you to use test flight. If you're going to distribute betas of your software through test flight, that's why you need this. And then finally, when signing it, one of the certificates will give you your Apple ID information. You'll copy that from the keychain into this developer ID. Again, it's a one-time thing, and you need to turn on sandboxing. So once you've done all that, then you're pretty much ready to go. The only thing is each time you want to upload or publish a new version to Apple, to App Connect, again, not necessarily all the way to the App Store, just to get it out like a new beta, for example, to your users if you're using test flight, you'll need to make sure to change the version each time, even if it's just the bug version. This version number has to change every time, or you'll get an error message because it thinks it's overriding the version that was already there. So that's the one thing that does have to be changed each time. This process is even simpler with iOS apps. Javier, what was the difference? What things do you not have to do for iOS?
Well, on iOS, you don't need to manage the provisioning profile because that is managed by Xojo itself. Also, you don't need to set the developer ID because the only thing you have to do is to select the team ID,
Yeah,
and
because there's a team
ID
ID.
will
Yeah,
select or differentiate if it is for the App Store or not. And of course, you need to set the icons for the iOS app and
right,
also change the version because it makes sense. If you already publish it to the App Store Connect version 1.0, it doesn't make sense to send again over version 1.0.
right,
So
right.
it's the only thing you have to do.
Yeah. So it's simpler with iOS than with the Mac. But again, all of this is actually fairly easy to set up. And then in App Store Connect, you can put in screenshots and all the marketing information and that kind of stuff. And once you've done your testing and you're ready to publish in App Store Connect on the web, you go to your app and there's I think it's send for review or add to review. There's a button that's really obvious that you press, and that lets Apple know that you're ready to have them review the app for publishing in the App Store. But other than that, it's actually very straightforward. I believe this all has to be done on a Mac though. So if you're doing cross-platform and you're doing your development from Windows or Linux, when you go to publish to and Javier, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you have to do your publishing to the App Store from a Mac. Is that correct?
Yeah, you only are able to publish from Mac because on Windows and Linux you can't install the software that
Right.
is able to publish
It's using,
to
yeah,
the
behind the scenes.
App
Yeah.
Store.
Okay.
Mm.
Okay, well, anyway, so yeah, so it's one of these things that you set it up once and then it's done. Like I'm going to change my version here to 2, just so you can see this work. And then I'll press publish. And it's going to think a minute. It asks me if I want to go ahead and do that. Yes, I do. So it builds the app just like normal. And then it's creating the package and uploading it to Apple. It's pretty straightforward. So again, I recommend that you create a Hello World app just to go through this whole thing yourself and feel comfortable with it. That way, when you go to actually do this with one of your real apps, you'll totally be comfortable and won't miss a spot and won't have some last minute thing. Okay, there we go. Success. The package has been successfully sent, and it says you'll be able to select the new build uh, for the Mac App Store reviewing process. So it shows you it here, and there's a bunch of log files, but it's now up at Apple. And if I went to my App Store Connect, then we would see it there. All right, so let's see. Let me stop screen sharing for a minute. There's some chat. Just wanted to see if there's any questions here. Oh, okay. There are some questions. Let's see. So Edwin's asking, so with the web list box, apply column formats, only the entire. Oh, he's asking if the. Okay. Edwin's asking when you select a column type, um, does it apply to the whole column or can it apply to specific cells? Ricardo, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe what you can do is you can apply it to the whole column and then override it for specific cells. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. You can specify the whole column type, and then on specific cells, you can override that value.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I remembered. Okay. Oh yeah, so it looks like Ricardo had already replied to that. Okay, great. All right, so let's see. Edwin's also asking about the version info. I have a feature request in mind. When the version string is not set, it should be generated. Yeah, I agree. I don't know why we don't generate the short version number for you. I almost wonder, if we shouldn't have it solely generated. I'm not sure why you need to type it in both places. I guess for a beta maybe, but then we should probably have well, that's the non-release number. So we probably could generate it. You should put that in the issues system. We should definitely consider that. Um, oh yeah, somebody said that they use a short Xojo script for it. Yeah, James is talking about that. Let's see if there's any more comments. Carl's asking about sidebar control and updated toolbar control. Yes, the sidebar is definitely something that we want to do. Absolutely. We want you guys to have it, but we want to use it in the IDE as well. So we're definitely interested in doing that. Jurg's asking, let's see, will the publish toolbar button be hidden if an app is not wanted to be published? No, we don't have the toolbar. It's not good. It's not good UI to have things disappear completely. You can disable features, but generally in a toolbar, you don't want things disappearing. On the on Windows, I don't think we have that at all there because you can't yet publish to the Windows App Store. Now, supporting other app stores is absolutely something we want to do, but the other app stores that we don't currently support are much easier to deal with than the iOS and Mac app stores. So that's one of the reasons we prioritized getting those in first. They're just a lot more trouble. Let's see what else. Okay, that's it for questions in there. But you don't have to ask all your questions through chat. This isn't a webinar, so feel free to unmute and ask any questions, comments. And it doesn't have to be about R1. It could be about anything else. We've still got about half an hour. We don't have to go an hour if you don't want to, but just in case. Yeah, feel free to ask any questions, make any comments. Don't be shy. Javier, what was it like? The process of doing the Mac App Store. What was it like getting that working?
Oh, from the development point of view, our development point of view, or what?
Yeah, from your point of view, the development point of view.
Oh, that single button involves a lot of work behind scenes to make everything work. And one of the things that probably users be be great to have is that if you omit some of the required steps, or if something is missing in the setup in order to make it successfully the upload to the App Store Connect, you will get the errors in the error panel pointing the missing part, the missing component,
Yes.
and where you can correct it and the missing parts that you need to fill in. Also, I think that if you omit the short version string during the preparation of submitting, we fill in that value based on the values for the version major, minor, bug, etc.
Okay, so
So
if you
probably,
leave it out, we'll have to test that. That'd be
yeah,
great. If you leave it out,
yeah.
that would make
We
sense.
we do that. And also for probably for R2, we are going to make even easier the step to embed the provisioning profile so you don't have to rename it. That is
Right.
a powerful thing because you only will have to drag and drop the downloaded file to copy file step, and we will be in charge of rename it with the proper name and just submit all the stuff.
Yeah.
Having that distribution profile or embedded profile is good because it allows any macOS app developed with Xojo to be available through test flight, what means that any of your users will be able to download test flight app on their Mac and retrieve that beta or alpha version from you, test it, and send you back feedback or comments in general about how it is working.
Yeah,
So
I,
it's
I have I
it's
have
really
beta
transparent
tested.
for you to do that.
Yeah, I've beta tested some Mac apps and some iOS apps for other developers. Using TestFlight, and boy, if you have not used TestFlight, it is great because every time they put out a new beta, I get a notification, and I tap the notification, it launches TestFlight. I tell it I wanted to install the latest version of the beta, and I'm often ready to go. And it'll tell you, what's changed and things. I mean, it's you can give feedback like Javier said. It's a great system that Apple's put together to make it easy for developers to distribute betas. Test Flight is really, really terrific. I think don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure that Test Flight started as a third-party app. I think Apple bought Test Flight.
Yeah.
Yeah. So um, Hans is asking, is it possible to create a so-called ad hoc provision profile for App Store to only give named persons by Mac ID access to your app? Do you know,
Yeah,
Javier, if that's possible?
yeah, that's possible. So you can do it as you can do it also for iOS.
Okay. And he's asking, can we describe that process in the docs? If you can get that information together, we can update the docs and explain to people, because I could totally see people wanting to do that. Absolutely.
Yeah, as you know, or probably you know, there are some different kind of provisioning profiles as
Right.
development provisioning profile, distribution provisioning profile, ad hoc distribution provisioning profile, and all of those are created at developer.apple.com. So you only have to go there, fill in the requested fields based on the app ID, that is the same that the identifier or bundle identifier. And then once it is created, download, embedded it on your app.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah, and for
Anyway,
the
the main difference is that ad hoc profiles are not purposed for distribution to App Store Connect. So that's why in this particular case, when it's about publishing to App Store Connect, you require a distribution profile.
so if it's an ad hoc, you
Ad
can't
hoc
go to
and
the App Store
development
at all.
profiles are basically for mm, creating the app for development. That is, so you can send it to users, but not through TestFlight or through App Store Connect.
Okay. And James is asking the Apple ID, developer ID, etc. Are those saved in the project or Xojo preferences? No, they're saved in the project. You have to put them in every time. And there's a reason for that. For example, if you are a developer who does work for several companies, you may have developer IDs for individual companies. And so we don't want those being a global preference. It's something you need to put in. And some of the information comes from certificates too that may change based like for the app that identifies the app, for example. But anyway, point being is no, yeah, you have to put that into each project. But having said that, and this is a little used feature that you could use just for this purpose, and that is you could create an empty project with all your developer ID stuff in it and save it as an app template. The app template feature doesn't get used often enough in Xojo, project template rather. You can save it as a project template, and then when you start off with a project that you know you're eventually going to have in the App Store, you can start with your project template, and it just makes an untitled document, and it's already got your ID in it and all that stuff. Yeah, oh, James didn't know they exist. Yeah, most people don't know they exist, and it's funny too because they're right, they're kind of right there when you create a new. In fact, let me share my screen. Um, you make a new project, templates right here, right? So there's only two that come with Xojo, Empty Service and Event Driven Console, but you can make your own and have them in here. I've been thinking about making DB into which is a project I'm working on, into a template as well, so that you don't have to open the DB project and drag it out. You can just, start a new application that already has DB start a new project that already has DB in it. So yeah, so that's a cool feature that that people don't use often enough. So. Other questions? Anything? Comments? Again, doesn't have to be about this. Oh, one of the things that Javier told me, and he can comment on this, was the process behind the scenes for Mac versus iOS is very similar. So I think, Javier, correct me if I'm wrong, you told me that once you got one done, doing the other one was actually pretty straightforward because the processes are that similar to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wanted to point out that, especially for those developing for macOS and iOS, you guys are going to get also benefit from the new property list editor that now is available also in the ID. So you don't need to edit those files using an external text editor and drag and drop to the navigator because everything is managed now from the property list editor.
That is where do I find it?
On macOS, if you select macOS entry,
Oh,
you can see
right here.
edit.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, so you can pick something and then you can set the key and the value and or you can export them and load them if you have sets that you use a lot. So yeah, it's a cool editor that Javier's added to the IDE. Do you have one of these you want to demonstrate real quick? Just like
oh yeah, I can do a quick demo.
yeah.
So let me share my screen.
And Edwin's asking if they can access the property list data at runtime, basically.
You can do that as you would do with any other property list file from your app at runtime. So there are several techniques you can use for that. What we don't provide is the editor itself. I mean, you cannot embed the property list editor in your own apps because
No,
it's not a
yeah,
control that is
I think he was
public.
asking if there's an API, but the answer is the property list editor is just creating a file. So you would just open
Yeah,
the file. Yeah.
and in fact, it is created when you compile or build the app. So once it is created and embedded in the bundle itself, at runtime, you can use several techniques to access the keys and values for that property list.
And it's just a text file, right?
Yeah, it's a text file. It's
Yeah.
an
So,
XML text file. So
yeah.
So this is the property list editor, and in this case, I'm going to drag and drop the property list editor from Xcode itself. So you can see
Nice.
that all the keys that are imported or added in this case, it display the type of every entry and of course the value.
Yep.
And you can, for those that are arrays or dictionaries, you can open the hierarchy to see the new keys, values, blah, 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 and also add new entries to it, as in this case, new key. And in the case of primitive values, even it is possible to convert them from, in this case, Boolean to number, from
Nice.
number to a string, and from a string back to Boolean. And if you find yourself using the same property list for all your projects, you can export the property list editor to
Right.
any place you want. Let's cancel so the data is not saved, and then retrieve it in your new projects, and you don't have to write again and again and
Right.
again the same keys and values for it. All these entries, just so you know, all these entries are safe with the project itself. So if I confirm that I'm not going to do in this particular project, but if you confirm the changes and you save the project, all these entries and values are saved with the project. So the next time you open the project, those entries are retrieved and you will see
Yeah,
them
it'll be
here.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And James is asking how to add a help file to the app before sending to the Mac App Store. I assume you mean an Apple help file. I think that would just be a build step, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would just be a build step.
Yeah.
Copy file step is what I meant.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's you just add a copy file step, drag the file in, James, and tell it in the inspector where you want it to put it. Just like that, just like what I did with the profile, right? When I was showing you where to put the profile for using with test flight, same thing. So yeah, just look up copy file step in the documentation if you haven't used that before. It's very, very straightforward.
Yeah. You can
I've
add
used
to the
that.
project everything that is allowed by the upper review store process.
Yeah,
So resources like help files or any other kind of resource that is allowed by the App Store guidelines, it's okay to put it in the app bundle before sending it.
yeah,
Okay, thank you.
yeah. Um, Ricardo, regarding drag and drop on the web, this is kind of our first step, adding a lot of drag and drop to the web. Are there other things that you're thinking about for the future in terms of drag and drop on the web?
Yeah. For drag and drop, for example,
Yeah,
I also want to enable support for dragging things outside of the app, like for example files, and drop into the website, for example. But other than that, I think I'd like to see an style editor
yeah,
like we used to have in Web1, for example,
yes,
and more tools to enable developers to create responsive designs for websites.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That'd be great. Yeah. And yeah, but going back to drag and drop, being able to drag files, for example, in from the desktop to the web, right? That would be very, very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a pretty common use case. Like for
Yes.
example, if you want to create a web application where you can drop a movie file uh,
Yeah.
captured with your iPhone and you want to convert it to MP4,
Yeah.
I don't know, you could create a web service
Yes.
that supports drag and drop.
Yes.
I
Very
mean,
cool.
at the moment you can use the web file uploader, but I don't know, it would be cool.
Yeah. Now I'm going to put you on the spot and ask, um, do you think we'd ever be able to do drag events? Have you thought about a way we could have drag events for the canvas on the web?
Well, yeah. Well, the problem with that is that every event that you perform on the browser will have to travel to the backend server, and it will have a latency.
Yeah,
So
I
it
think what
will
we'd have to
be
do is just have a single drag event and a single drop. Well, there's always a single drop, but it would just be like begin drag. It wouldn't be drag where you get a drag event every time you move the mouse, right? Something like that. Maybe. I don't know.
yeah, yeah. We have an experimental feature that you can turn on the session class, which is for send events in batches, which is going to be the default in the future.
Yeah.
And that will help to enable more events like that. Like, for example, if you want to monitor every key press on a web text field,
Yeah.
at the moment it's not possible because it causes a lot of traffic.
Yeah.
But with that experimental feature, it would be possible to bring it back again to the web framework.
So how so it's sending rather than sending events as they happen, it's bundling them up into batches and sending the
Yeah,
batches.
it's going to group all of them every, I don't know how much is it, like 100 milliseconds, for example,
Okay.
and it will send them to the other place.
And for a lot of things, that would be good enough because I mean that's a tenth of a second. So
Yeah, yeah. The problem we used to have is it was causing a lot of communication with the backend. So instead of having to deal with 100 events one by one, you can
yeah,
just send the batch and it's going to be much faster and it won't cause any trouble to the server.
yeah, great. I'm looking forward to that. That sounds
Yeah.
like a great solution.
I mean,
When Edwin's asking, is there a way to have WebDrag events be processed by local JavaScript on the page? Is that possible?
what you could be doing is using the web SDK, you can do all these
Oh yeah,
kind of
that's true.
stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, with the Web SDK, if you need that badly, then that's a potential solution.
Yeah, but I think with this generic drag and drop solution, you can go really far without touching a line of JavaScript. I mean, the Kanban board
Yeah.
example, it uses some CSS, but it doesn't use any JavaScript at all or any external library. Every component is a custom component created inside Xojo.
Okay. Oh, so all the cards you're dragging are what are those? I didn't look at the source code to see what the project is
Yeah.
doing.
The card is a web container that contains a web rectangle
Oh,
and
okay.
a web
That's easy.
label.
Yeah.
And the column is a web container that
Yeah.
supports the drop. So it's pretty easy. I mean, it looks like it could be a library that we'd
Right.
use, but it's also you.
You're just dragging containers around,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. And you can also use drag and drop with controls created with the web SDK. So if you are using a third-party developer plugin and it has a control, you can use the new drag and drop feature.
Like stuff from Graffiti Suite, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. That's great. That's great.
Yeah. It's really nice. I'm looking forward to see how users are using this new feature.
Yeah, that reminds me of something I wanted to say, and that is that one of the things that we try to focus on are the features that, things that a lot of people would have need for that are also difficult or impossible for you to do yourself. So it doesn't have to be a big complicated feature. Sometimes it's something small, but it would be, unless we do it, you really can't do it, right? So that's a criteria that we use as well. So, but there's a ton of little features in this release. Like I said, you're going to have to go through the release notes, but I see them, as we go through a development cycle, I see things getting checked in, and I see the notes from the engineers about what they've added. And there's just a whole lot of great stuff on all the platforms, iOS and desktop and web, and there's a bunch of new stuff for Android. Android's really come a long way since we started. It's getting really close to the point where it's, pretty close to the point where it's equivalent to iOS for what Android does, because iOS and Android do have their differences. And this isn't really R1 related, but we do have a plan ultimately down the road to combine Android and iOS, and we've talked about this before, into a single mobile project. So I look forward to that day as well. All right, let's see. Oh, there's a question about templates from Edwin. He says, I had some issues in the past when it looked like I was editing the template instead of creating a new project based on the template. Yeah, I definitely look again, because they do work pretty well. If you run into any problems, let us know. But templates are definitely a powerful but underutilized feature in Xojo. Like I said, I'm thinking about delivering dbKit as a template, because that would be just a really easy way. You start up a new project, pick a template, to pick the dbKit template, and then dbKit's already there, rather than having to open the project and drag it in. So I think that's all I wanted to cover. Let's see. Here's a question. Someone, Refi, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm new to Xojo, but have you noticed you can't update in place? You seem to have to download a whole new version and remember to. Oh yeah, the Xojo IDE does not replace itself. You have it downloads a new version, and that's because you're new to Xojo, so you're not aware of this. But sometimes some users are maintaining multiple copies, so they'll have older versions of Xojo that are there to support functionality that isn't supported in newer versions because there's newer operating systems. So, we try not to do that, but sometimes we have to deprecate or remove things because we can't move forward if we don't. So yeah, so that's why we don't just replace the IDE for you. Yeah, so that's by design. It's intentional. Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, I appreciate everybody coming to this Hangout. We'll keep having these about once a month, and we're looking forward to shipping our first release for 2025. It's got a lot of really cool, exciting stuff in it. And, you guys know we've got our roadmap published in the documentation. One thing about development tools, we're never sitting around wondering, gee, what do we do next? There's always way more stuff to do than we have time to do. So we have to prioritize things. But there's an endless list of things that we can add to make Xojo an even better product. Okay, so there's one more thing from Leo. He's asking, I've been wondering, is there a general timeline for when we can expect Windows 11 WinUI controls to replace the older controls? We are working on that. I don't know exactly what the timeline is just yet, but our first step was adding the XAML stuff. But that is a very important feature that we're working on for a future release. And my understanding is that how we're going to do it, at least initially, is there will be a checkbox. So you're not going to have to replace your controls. You'll just be able to say whether you want it to be WinUI or the old Win32 controls. So it's going to be a pretty straightforward migration in that respect, because it's basically just a setting. And then at some point that setting will be on by default, and you know how it goes. So, all right. Thanks everybody for coming, and until next time, happy Xojoing. Bye for now.
Bye.